As most of you know, I'm Lisa Herrick. I started the group, and I often just start off our meetings with a hello and something that I want to say. And then I turn it over to Jim to do a bit of a presentation of analysis and telling us why we're doing what we're doing and what we're doing now and what we're doing next. And then a bit later, we're going to hear from Stacie Anderson, who is the executive director of the Montana Donor Table. You don't know what a donor table is, you will find out. She runs a group called A Better Big Sky. So we will be hearing from Stacie in a bit. A little bit later in the program, we'll be hearing from John Medaglia, who's on the leadership team, talking about our letter writing that has gotten going. And we'll also be talking with Peter Hansen, who is creating a Facebook presence for us. So he will be talking a little bit about that. So what I want to say, my few minutes this afternoon, I was trying to figure out, what to talk about. And my husband forwarded me an article from the New York Times, which I had actually noticed but ignored. And the headline was, "The Resistance Says It's Exhausted." The article quotes one activist who runs a grassroots group as saying, "Some folks are burned out on outrage." One of the citizens the reporter interviewed said, "We are kind of like crisised out." Burnout tends to stem from a sense of helplessness. I think most of us know that. But when there are actions to take, when we know that an action will be effective, generally people take those actions. In 2024, so that means it's about 7 weeks so far, 31st Street members and your networks have contributed over $78,000 for Pennsylvania, $77,000 for North Carolina, if I get any of my numbers right, Jim will correct me, over $44,000 so far for Montana. And in what we called a mini fundraiser for Michigan, donors contributed over $30,000. So all told, 31st Street members have raised over $230,000 for grassroots efforts to reach out to and mobilize voters in various states in about 7 weeks. One member responded to my latest newsletter this week by letting me know that she and a group of ladies she calls worker bees have sent out 1,800 postcards. She just organized these ladies on her own, and they have sent out 1,800 postcards since January 20th. Another member emailed me after my newsletter to ask if 31st Street would potentially consider organizing canvassing in Arizona. He's already thinking about that. So my takeaway is, yeah, we're all sometimes burned out. And if a reporter asked me about my mood these days, I would probably say exhausted. But I am also active. And I think we all are. I'm also very busy, as we all are. And I'm also feeling extremely determined, as I think we all are. 31st Street and the thousands of other activists and grassroots groups all throughout our country just keep putting one foot in front of the other, despite the crises, despite the exhaustion, despite the burnout. We just keep going. As many of you know, I have 3 grandchildren and 1 due any day now. And I have, fortunately or unfortunately, memorized the book Going on a Bear Hunt, in which a little family goes through the swamp and they go through the grass and they go through the forest and they go through the water on a bear hunt. And the chorus of the book is, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it. And through it, we will go. As I quoted in my last newsletter, after the murder of Alexei Navalny, he said, not long before his death, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. So don't be inactive," he said. "You are not allowed to give up." So I close by saying that in memory of Alexei Navalny, let me go on record to say 31st Street is not going to give up, and we won't. We will be here throughout this year and the next and the next. We're not going anywhere. So thank you all for being here, and I'm now turning it over to Jim.
Great. And just so you can get, I'm going to show slides. So this is your chance to see my face and whatever is behind me. Just to say, I'm by no means burned out. I find all this actually quite interesting and sometimes even fun. So I may sound a little strange, but it's actually in my retirement been a salvation for me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show a bunch of concepts. Hopefully that will be really useful to people. And here we go. Come on now. See that and hear me? Everything? Okay. So I thought I would just jump right in and say, you know, what are we about? What are the precepts? What have we learned? And how do we think that we can be the most effective in what we do? A lot of you have heard much of this, but I've got a reformulation of it here right now. The first, of course, is that there is, and I'm calling it super huge direct funding for the marquee races. I saw one estimate of $18 billion overall, most of which will go to the marquee races like Biden and so forth. So the marginal dollar from us really is not going to have any impact on those kind of, you know, federal races basically at all. So we go a different way. It's a path, you know, less often taken, which is to support grassroots groups and state Democratic parties, primarily also state legislatures. And now is the time. Right now is the prime time to be doing this, especially for voter registration and doing organizing. And I'll be making the case of why that is. We call that infrastructure, partly because it should be something that goes on an ongoing basis. And to make that point again, early money, especially right now, in the next couple of months, few months, is especially crucial. One other thing that's motivating us that's a little different than some other people in some ways is that I really think that the value of having a national trifecta, presidency, House, Senate, is very important. And the Senate is not getting as much attention by other people, in my opinion, as it should. If we don't have all three, it'll be, you know, kind of more stalemate, whereas we could get many things done if we had all three. Doesn't mean, I mean, we're supporting all three, but it means we're kind of pointing a fair amount toward the US Senate. And it's the one that's the most difficult. It's the one that's teetering on the edge, as you know. But also legislatures are very important. We'll get to funding them later in the cycle. That's important because we know if you just look at what happened in Michigan or Minnesota recently, or even in a negative way in North Carolina, just what legislatures do is very important. But we also really believe that when we have good legislature candidates, it helps up ballot. We call it reverse coattails or power up. So those are basically our precepts. But also, there's a lot of swing states, actually. I mean, in a way, there's not that many, but in a way, to try to deal with them, and we won't deal with all of them, is actually quite challenging. But I just want to say that, like many things in life, when you're deciding priorities, looking at the need, but also looking very carefully at the opportunity. And it's really in many ways on the opportunity side that we kind of earn our stripes by connecting with a lot of people and looking at a lot of information and data to figure out where the good investments are. And we have this metaphor I can't resist of the three-legged stool. It's great to have great candidates in races, but if you don't have a Democratic Party, and especially a state Democratic Party that's robust, along with grassroots roots, I think that and I think appreciation of grassroots groups, by the way, both of the C3, C4 type that we're talking about, but also our type, is becoming better appreciated by, the power structure, if you will. So, okay, now why is early funding important? Well, kind of obvious in a way, but you got this election cycle leading up to November, but these organizations, they've got to know what their resources are so they can plan. But also, they're going to be hiring staff. They have to recruit them, train them, deploy them in a good kind. Now, a lot of these organizations, of course, are already doing this, but they need to scale up. And they also need to assess what they're doing or find and so forth. Those of you who work in organizations know how important this is. And it's not just an easy thing of just putting out a RFP for hiring people. It's a process. It takes time to do well. Another thing that takes time is building relationships. That's a lot of why we are even doing this with these people, these wonderful people, I should say, that they have their communities that they live in and they work in, and but that takes time as well. The other thing is, though, that early, especially voter registration, but fairly soon, ongoing voter contact. I'm a strong believer in ongoing voter contact, especially for low frequency voters. This is all very important to do right now. If we wait till August, it's too late. So now turning to the state map, I want to talk a little bit about our priorities. Many people, of course, have a good sense of this. We're trying to span presidential, Senate, to some extent House, but House is so diffuse. It's harder to do, but we're definitely going to be working on the House as well. Color code a little bit, and this shifts from time to time. But you can see there's a good number of states that we're trying to deal with to some extent, and to some a large extent. And Pennsylvania remains our highest priority. We already did a honest media campaign with them, and we'll be coming back to that. I've got this also grid. This is again mostly on need, but a little bit opportunity. And the darker it is, the more important, the higher priority it is. I've showed this, I think, at the last meeting as well. It gives you a sense of what's at stake in these various states, and it shifts a little bit around. This is another way of looking at it, which is most of those same states. And how I see our fundraising. This is, by the way, this is all a pitch about fundraising, folks, up to now, just so you're not lost on you. I see us doing support for grassroots groups, for Democratic parties, and then later on support for legislatures. I'd like to do all of it much sooner than that, but we can only do so much. But there are a lot of dark blue rectangles here, and even some fairly close to dark blue rectangles. So we're going to be doing a significant amount of fundraising. I see us doing a fundraiser every 6 weeks or so for several cycles. You see the check marks. We're doing North Carolina and Montana. One of the ways we're doing this to try to accommodate, I think, doing a lot, which is important, is doing them at 2 at a time. And so what we're doing now with this fundraiser coming up on Thursday is a little bit of an experiment to see about how to do that. But actually, so far, it's working pretty well, because there are people, lo and behold, they're very interested in North Carolina. And there are people, lo and behold, that are very interested in Montana. And we're actually getting a certain amount of synergy from this. But we'll be doing something soon. A lot of it, again, depends on opportunity, whether we think there's a good opportunity to support these entities based on our assessment of them. And Pennsylvania will be coming up soon. All right, now I did want to, as Lisa mentioned, a state donor table. This is a great entity that we now have in our ecosystem. And it comes about because there are major donors. This is what my understanding of it, major donors that have realized that we need to have people in all the key states to be set up to sort of help facilitate donation, but also the use of funds. So there's a small paid staff. This committee on states, I think, is the key actor. You won't find, they're pretty low profile, these people. But there's a small paid staff in these states. They all know each other. They get together on a nationwide basis, but they become experts on the state situation. And this is one of the things we evaluate. You heard Jessica Lawrence from North Carolina last month, and we're hopefully very impressed about how much she knows. But they support and they coordinate, nurture the various nonprofits, the C3s and the C4s in the state. And the thing that's also important for us is that part of their job is to provide advice to donors like us, advice, but also to some extent donation mechanisms that allow for efficiency and also, I think, more precision in making donations. And this is the one for Montana. Of course, we're going to hear from Stacie in a couple of minutes. All right, so leading up to this, this is what we're doing now. We have a goal currently of $200,000 to raise for North Carolina and Montana. The C3, which is the the tax deductible versions, that's nonpartisan, and it's going reasonably well. I hope you'll join us on Thursday at 7 p.m. for that. And this is who we're actually supporting. So the way it's set up when you donate, it says, you have these things that say the North Carolina so-and-so, but this is who we're donating in North Carolina. I've been in presentations by the C3s. These people are dynamite. The A. Philip Randolph Institute and what's called ACE. They're mostly going to work in Mecklenburg County. You heard about this hopefully a month ago, the last meeting. But also this is their recommendation from the donor table of who to fund for the C4 side. You may recognize that we actually funded 2 years ago 2 of these, Down Home and Siembra. So we feel comfortable with that. Now with Montana, it's a much smaller menu, but it's going to be very effective, I believe, just as well. So on the tax deductible side, we're supporting an organization called Western Native Voice Education Project. They're great on registering Native Americans, both on and off the reservation, which is a very big, important constituency in Montana. And they also have a C4 side that we're supporting and a particularly effective student outreach group called Montperg. And again, at least for the C4s, we're using the mechanism that the donor table set up so we can just support them, and they will in turn support these organizations. It's a honor system. We have faith for them. They're telling us they're going to do this and we believe them. So again, and they have the ability to maybe make some minor shifts if they think it's warranted. We have an understanding with them that they're on the ground, they know what's happening. And so it's kind of the best of all possible worlds where we're donating to things we think are good, but also they are providing their input as well. All right, so now why am I showing you this? You may remember this from a year or two ago. It is, and I know Mary remembers this, it's for front loading. So basically what we're saying is that now's the time to be donating. If like me, you're concerned about saving our democracy and defeating the MAGA Republicans and winning a trifecta, the way to just do it is to donate money now in the next 2 or 3 months. And it will have much more impact than it will have later on. So I encourage you to do that. Now, just shifting briefly to Montana. I don't want to steal Stacie's thunder, but there's a lot of things going on here, a lot more than you might have thought in Montana, including an abortion. I guess it's an initiative. All these things going on actually are good for us because there's a synergy that all this energy that, that is going to come together for us is going to help us a lot. And we really, of course, do think that there's a great opportunity with these particular grassroots groups that are going to do great work in Montana. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacie in a minute, just to say that our custom is that we don't spend a lot of time with long introductions about candidates. We leave it to you to say what you want to about yourself. But I can tell you that Stacie really knows Montana and what is needed. So I will stop sharing and over to you, Stacie.
Great. So much. Thanks so much, Jim. Lovely to meet you all. I'm Stacie Anderson, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of A Better Big Sky, which is the Montana Donor Alliance. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully, I'm going to look to Lisa to nod that she can see my screen. Oh, fabulous. Okay, great. Well, this, a lovely picture of Montana, and I'm going to give you a brief sort of overview of what's at stake in Montana and why it's so important. Jim, obviously, we did not coordinate our slides, but you'll see some themes that run through both of our presentations. So, I didn't know if you guys were familiar with the Donor Alliance concept, so I put in a quick three slides that really kind of highlight, what is a Donor Alliance and why do we exist and how do we help in our states? And we really see ourselves as the keeper of the larger ecosystem. We have a lot of really great in-state groups doing important work, aligning with our mission, whether it's to make sure to turn out conservation voters or empower youth or protect women access. And all of those folks sort of work together in concert, but there isn't really an organization outside the donor alliances that's looking at sort of the 30,000-foot view. What do these groups need to thrive in an ecosystem? And that is where donor alliances come in, that we can kind of, fill gaps, address needs, provide resources outside that, may not be authentic to one individual's organization, but would help all of the organizations that are doing this important work. The other thing is that we try to fund for the near term and build for the long term. So, we and people in various states, especially if you've been a battleground state, you'll see all of this money and all of this resource come in and sort of parachute in, and then they leave and it leaves a bust. And so it's like, how do we have a more sustained ongoing balance and funding and plans? And, we are working on off of a 5 to 10 year strategic plan. Obviously, this year's election cycle is a part of building to that long-term plan, but we're already starting to think about what life looks like in Montana after this November's election. So we fund, a lot of things within the ecosystem, whether it be data and research or, trying to figure out how to create a pipeline for leadership. We have legislative term limits here in Montana. We also like to fund at the municipal level. Full transparency, on top of being the donor table director, I also serve as an elected official. I am in the middle of my second term on the Missoula City Council, so I have a passion for local politics, but I also think it's a really great place for a pipeline and investing in people and policies that affect, all people all across our state. So that's a very quick overview of how we see ourselves as the Donor Alliance. And one of the things that Jim talked about is that we are experts in our state. I'm born and raised in Montana and have been working in progressive politics pretty much my entire adult life. And, my husband jokes that I'm like the master of the Montana 3D chessboard, which it's very flattering. I don't always necessarily feel that way, but, our job is to really intimately understand the Montana ecosystem, Montana voters, and the groups that exist in Montana. So just a little bit about voters in Montana that some of you may not know. Montanans love to vote. We have had over 70% voter turnout in every presidential election in the last 20 years. In 2020, we had 81% voter turnout. We consistently rank within the top 5 states in the country in terms of voter turnout. We are also have a high registration of people or percentage of people who are eligible to vote who are registered. So we, are not a Georgia where if you just mobilize a large constituency of minority population that you could really have a big effect in the outcome because so many people are already registered and engaged in voting. We're anticipating between 74-75% voter turnout for this particular election. Montana also is the oldest state demographically, west of the Mississippi. In most states, in a presidential election year, your voting age average goes down. In Montana, it goes up. We are anticipating our average voter age for Montanans will be 63 years old. Over half of our population is over the age of 55. And our largest minority population is Native Americans, who represent about 9% of our population. We think that number is a little low because historically Native Americans are the most undercounted minority population in the entire country. And we do have, it's a very large state. And with not a lot of people, we have 2 cows for every 1 person in Montana. We have legislative districts that are literally the size of Rhode Island in eastern Montana. So, and we still put a lot of premium on retail politics in Montana. The good news, and Jim talked a little bit about infrastructure, and we have really strong infrastructure in Montana. Where, you know, it might be a small number of groups, but we are the coalition that have consistently been getting Jon Tester elected. We worked really hard in 2022 to get a Supreme Court seat reelected. And so we know what it takes to win in Montana. We have the groups who are doing the C4 work, which is more coordinated. C3 nonprofits doing voter registration, education on various issues. We have the Donor Alliance, which try to help bring progressive funding into the entire ecosystem. And then the Donor Alliance started a communications hub 2 years ago to really help us have a more cohesive, coordinated message that all groups can work off of. So we have the infrastructure in state. We also know who our targeted constituencies are and who we need to make sure are getting registered, getting turned out, what groups speak to those particular constituencies. You know, conservation is really important in Montana because outdoor, you know, access and is a way of life. Hunting, fishing, rafting, just being able to enjoy the outdoors is such a core piece of what is, you know, the lifestyle you live in Montana. You know, we are still a state that is very pro-union. We have been fighting off right to work in the last several legislative sessions very successfully. You know, strong support for unions. We need to continue to lean into a working families message in Montana. We're also a pro-choice state. Over 50% of Montanans are in favor of, you know, abortion access, and continue to, you know, reaffirm that belief in how they vote for Supreme Court justices, as well as how they vote for various ballot measures. We still need to make sure that we're focusing on youth. And then we also, like I said, have our Native American population. We're lucky that we have an organization, which you guys are helping to support, Western Native Voice, that is Native led, and they are hiring folks on reservation, as well as for the first time ever, the population really, we feel, is pretty evenly split for Native Americans who are living in our urban areas, as well as those who are living on reservation. And this group is the kind of the marquee group to do the work in that area. You know, this just is another way to highlight the fact that, you know, Montana does not have party registration, but we feel pretty confident that these are the baseline numbers. So there is not enough people who, if we just turn out all the Democrats, that we can actually win elections. And if the demographic of people who turned out in 2022 to get Ingrid Gustafson reelected is really the demographics that we need to turn out in 2024. Democrats, independents, college-educated Republicans is the coalition that turned out, and that is who's historically been able to vote for Senator Tester. These numbers haven't hugely shifted over time. I think the partisan nature and the, you know, Montanans less and less splitting a voting split ticket has really changed. And that's where, you know, we've sort of moved in state more purple leaning red. We've always been a red state on the CNN presidential map, but here locally, we had a Democratic governor for 16 years up until 2020. At one point in time, all statewide offices were held by a Democrat. We've had a Democratic US senator for over 100 years in Montana. So it's, you know, the on the ground, what it looks like in Montana is a little bit different than may be is nationally portrayed. We have a really busy year this year. We do strongly believe, and Jim kind of talked a little bit about this, is that the strategy for winning in Montana is top down, bottom up. We need to make sure that we are winning in key legislative districts. We have 125 legislative seats up this year. We have 2 Supreme Court seats. We currently have a 4-3 progressive or pro-choice or pro-constitution majority on the Supreme Court. And we need to retain those seats. Obviously, we have to re-elect Senator Tester. He represents the most Republican state in the US Senate. It is really hard to retain a 50 or 51 majority in the US Senate without Senator Tester, especially now with Joe Manchin not running. So Ohio with Sherrod Brown, Montana, Arizona are going to be and Nevada, very critical for maintaining that majority in the Senate. And there's only a few there, there's only 50 of them. So when however many you're up this year, but Montana is a really important state. I'm just going to quickly talk about a couple of the races and then open up for questions. But obviously, nationally, Senator Tester is the #1 priority, and that's why Montana's on a lot of people's radar. But here in state, on top of making sure that Senator Tester gets reelected, our Supreme Court is so incredibly important. The 2 justices who are currently on the court are not running for reelection, so they're both open seats, and we've got 2 really great candidates who are running. Montanans continue to elect people who have been judges and really lean into the fact that they want a an impartial judiciary. And we are hoping that will be able to work in our favor, that we'll be able to continue to have the goalie that is our Supreme Court. And the reason why the Supreme Court in Montana is so incredibly important is because we have one of the most progressive state constitutions in the entire country. New York tried to challenge me on that, but I won out because we have a nonpartisan redistricting commission as a part of our state constitution. So, the right to privacy, individual dignity. I mean, so many incredible things are enshrined in our constitution, which was rewritten in 1972 by a group of 100 average Montanans. No elected officials were allowed to be a part of the Constitutional Convention. And they really came out with a really amazing document. You can see the preamble to it. We're all very incredibly proud of it. And that is also, how Montana in an area surrounded by red states, we still have reproductive freedom. We are considered a safe haven state. The Supreme Court has continued to say, yes, reproductive access, abortion rights are enshrined in our Constitution because we have the right to privacy. So it's an incredible document that we need to make sure we have a court to continue to protect it. Moving on, obviously the House is getting a lot of attention paid to it because it's such a narrow margin and it is such a cluster, to put it nicely. And we in Montana have a really unique opportunity because we are one of the only states that lost a House seat in redistricting, only to 20 years later gain it back. So this is the second election now where we have 2 congressional seats, and the Western Congressional, which is where I am here in Missoula, Monica Turnell is running again for re-election. And so it's a matchup exactly of the election 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there was no infrastructure in state with get out the vote from the party coordinated campaign, very minimal, i.e. Emily's List, House Majority PAC, DCCC, none of those folks came in for Monica, and she overperformed expectations and lost just by a little less than 8,000 votes. This year, she's on red to blue. Emily's List is coming in, House Majority PAC, and we have amazing infrastructure in place because of Senator Tester. So she's not going to have to worry about any of that get out the vote work because Tester's people are taking care of that through the coordinated party, and she just needs to get out and talk to voters. And she's an excellent retail politician, very smart, transparent. She's a good friend of mine, an Olympian, grew up on a farm, would be an excellent member of Congress. And we really think that this is the year that we might be able to pull this off. And wow, 1 additional House seat on the Democratic side sounds nice right about now. But this area of the state is growing more and is expanding in terms of people moving here, is also trending more Democratic. So we want to pick it up this time, but if not, it is going to continue to be in our sights. I talked a little bit about the, what we're expecting for voter turnout. Interestingly enough, 50% of the votes in Montana will come from 4 counties, which doesn't mean we can ignore the rural parts of the state. It means that we just have to close the gap. And this is what a winning map in Montana looks like. It's a lot of red, but some very important places of blue. This is the map that got Tester elected for his 3rd term in 2018. To win in Montana, like I said, we really focus on controlling the narrative. We do a lot of work with values first, issue second to create a cohesive narrative. Accountability is so incredibly important. Montana is a persuasion state, and we have to be doing that early. We cannot wait until the 60 days or so before the election to start to remind people about how terrible their local legislator is, or our governor is, or our congressperson, or Steve Daines, or Republican brand in general. They are all very similar. They are all out-of-state rich people who've moved to Montana, who are pretty out of touch with what it takes to live a normal day-to-day life in Montana. And Jon Tester is about as salt of the earth as they come. So persuasion is the name of the game. We need to lean into split ticket voters, because that's the only way Tester is going to get reelected. And we have to do targeted GOTV, because as I said, in 2020, we had 81% voter turnout, and we lost every statewide race by over 10 points. So unfortunately, Montana sort of throws on its head the adage of like higher voter turnout is better for Democrats. It's actually not the case in Montana. So this, as Jim said, one of the things that Donor Alliance works on is sort of figuring out what it's going to take to win in a more cohesive plan, bringing together every group's individual plans, weaving that together to say, okay, the plan to win in Montana is X. This is how we're going to win on the Supreme Court races, legislative races, work for Tester through all of the various C3, C4 state PACs, kind of, again, being that the issue expert, the money movement expert. Literally, we have trackers in place for all of our grassroots groups who are filling out to me, so I know in real time what money they're getting outside, what additional resources they need, whether there are gaps. And so when money comes in, I can help plug those holes. For example, in 2022, we spent all of the grassroots groups total spent $1.2 million in legislative races. A Better Big Sky contributed $500,000 to that. And we've plugged everybody's gap by the end of August. So every single grassroots group who was doing IE work in legislative races in 2022 had all the money they needed to execute on their plans by the 1st of September. And so they didn't have to worry about fundraising. They were just out talking to voters. And that's what, so the investment early to get hired, to get the infrastructure in place so that they can be running on all cylinders when we get to the more traditional election time is so incredibly critical. So that I went through very quick. I think I went a tiny bit over time, but that is a quick overview of Montana, what's at stake, our groups, and how we're going to get it done. And I'm happy to open up for any questions. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to brag about my home state and hopefully get you excited about investing in the great work that we're doing.
Thank you, Stacie. That was so impressive. I am Aaron Hamburger. I am the membership person at 31st Street Swing Left, and I am also the designated Q&A curator. So I will go ahead and lob you a few questions that have come up in the chat. And
Okay.
Ready. First one is, it sounds like what the Donor Alliance does is a lot like what the state Democratic Party does, or isn't it? Can you clarify that?
Yes and no. In Montana, we have some of the strictest campaign finance laws in the entire country. So the actual work with candidates, once they have filed, the firewall goes up pretty quickly. The party can do a lot of the work with candidates, with people who are willing to, arrange door knocking days for the candidate. The party can provide help with staff, help with mailers. We, on the independent expenditure side, cannot do any of that because of our campaign finance laws. So we really have to focus on then, we can do a lot through recruitment, But once people have filed, the firewall goes up. And so groups who are on the independent expenditure side are constituent groups who have members who are doing, I think Jim talked about that warm touch. It's like, okay, you're a member of Montana conservation voters, that we're a conservation champion, you get our newsletters, you get whatever. And then, it will come time for the election to be like, hey, you really need to vote for Mark Thane in this legislative race to all of our members who are there because he is the conservation champion. But they can't really be telling, hey, Mark, we're doing this thing for you because of our campaign finance laws. So we really have to have a strong party in Montana to play the part that they play. And then we on the other side play an important part. And then beyond elections, I mean, the groups that we are funding during the election cycle are also the groups who are doing work during the legislative session and advocating on issues all year round, building out their membership lists, recruiting people from those membership lists to run for office, to be champions in the legislature. So we don't do the same thing, but we provide a very complementary role, and we work pretty well here in Montana together.
Great. Now, how do the groups coordinate or collaborate with Native Americans, and what percentage of Native Americans vote?
Yes. So Native Americans make up about 9% of the overall population, and we're hoping to get their voter turnout to 65% this year. That's the goal that Western Native Voice have set. That I think there was one year when Obama ran in 2008 that Native American voter turnout got actually a little bit over that. So we have an alignment table. There are lots of tables in Montana. I try to call it the Donor Alliance and then the alignment table. And those are where all of the groups doing direct voter work, advocacy towards their members all get together. And if you've heard of America Votes or State Voices, those C3, C4 tables, we have those in Montana. And Western Native Voice, which is the organization representing and doing work in Indian country, sits at that table. The party also has a Native American program that they run as well on the other side of the firewall. And most of the time, the people they hire for that position at one point in time have worked for Western Native Voice. And so they know what the work that they do is. And for the most part, groups let Western Native Voice take the lead and provide, sort of supplemental help when requested, but we let them take the lead as the Native run organization in state.
Great. Another question was, are Big Sky 55 and Forward Montana part of your network?
They are, absolutely, yes. They are a part of our grassroots groups that we fund. And there's about 16 groups statewide that are a part of our alignment tables, and those two groups are a part of them. Yep. And the gentleman Pat Sweeney, who founded the Donor Alliance in 2018, in 2016, in our post-election analysis, we really saw that we were losing vote share from seniors. So he actually started Big Sky 55 Plus. So he's the kind of Yoda of Montana.
Related to that, actually, another question was, with an older population, do you highlight GOP threats to Social Security and Medicare? If so, how and how effectively?
Absolutely. So yes, absolutely. That's one of the things. The other one of the things is in Montana, we've had 11 rural nursing homes close in the last year.
Wow.
So we are running an accountability campaign right now that we're helping fund. Groups like Big Sky 55 are helping execute to really inform voters that, look at all the things that the Republicans who are in charge are doing to make your life harder. We also have had some, property taxes in Montana, even though compared to what most other states pay, percentage-wise is pretty low, but comparative to, what they've been in Montana are really high, and it's putting a lot of pressure, especially on like fixed income seniors. And so Big Sky 55 Plus just sent out a big series of mailers this last fall to be like, hey, look at all, the stuff that they, we're giving tax breaks to Northwestern Energy, but yet your property taxes went up by, some astronomical percentage. And did you realize that a good percentage of that increase in your property taxes actually goes to offset the, write-off that Northwestern Energy did? So that's in conjunction with our Donor Alliance or our communications hub doing some of that accountability, town halls with Tester, highlighting all the work that he's done around Medicaid being able to bargain for prescription drug prices, highlighting the fact that, insulin is now capped. So yes, we try to do a lot of positive accountability where there's opportunities to, and then take swings at the Republican brand when they're pretty out of touch, which they just keep giving us all these great issues.
That's great. By the way, I see a couple people have hands up. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to get to the ones that we can. We are time limited. But if we don't, then I'm sure Stacie can look at them when her portion is over and she can respond to you directly. The next question is, if Montanans hold such moderate to progressive views, why do they keep voting red?
That is the, oh man, that is the question that I'm constantly beating my head around. I think that what we have tried and where we have been successful is if we hyper localize the messaging. And so, yes, Republican brand, I mean, there unfortunately still a lot of the same messaging that we see in other states. It's incredibly frustrating of like, oh, Republicans are better on taxes. And then we're like, that's total BS because look what they're doing to your property taxes. But there's that ingrained sort of like, this team is this and this team is that. And just having to, it's so much harder to change someone's mind when they have made it up that Republican equals good on business, good on taxes, and that the Democrats are the warm fuzzy party. And like, if you need a hug, you come to us. But, if you want to actually get something done, you go to, and so having hyper local messaging, specific examples, is where it's really important. There is, and this is where like choice, I think, will be a really important issue. It is one of the swing issues. It's one of the things where Montanans are more moderate. And I think that that will help Senator Tester. We came within 150 votes from stopping a Republican supermajority in the last legislative session. That was 3 legislative districts that all total was 150 votes. So it's small margins. High quality candidate recruitment who are willing to go out and do the work is so important. But there is continuing to be additional polarization, and the number of people who are voting split ticket in Montana is going down, and that is a very troubling trend.
And just to be clear, the abortion amendment will be on the ballot this November.
So the quick lowdown on that is that right now it's working its way through the Supreme Court. So the folks have filed, Planned Parenthood filed to put it on the ballot. What it does is codify actual language in the Constitution. So it's a constitutional amendment saying that your right to abortion is protected, to actually expand beyond just saying your right to privacy, which is interpreted by the court to extend protections. The Attorney General, who's this very right-wing Republican, rejected it and said it was unconstitutional, which is his new authorities granted to him by the legislative session. It's now working its way through the Supreme Court. We expect them to have an answer for us in the next week or two. They either can agree with the Attorney General and say the ballot language was unconstitutional. They can kick it back to the Attorney General and have him reinterpret it and write different language, or they themselves, the Supreme Court, can write new ballot language. That's what we anticipate that they're going to do. As soon as we have the final ballot language, we're going into the field to test that messaging to make sure it is still, winnable. And if that is the case, then we will start with collecting signatures, and we have till June 21st to collect all the necessary signatures. So it's looking that way, but I can't say, for sure that it's going to be on the ballot because there's a couple more check boxes to go through at this point. Great.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then we all are going to stay on. Our meeting generally closes at 5, but we usually stay on for 10, 15 minutes to answer questions that did not get answered in the regular session. So if your question didn't get answered, stay tuned. We will be on later on to answer those. But last question for Stacie. And this is from some Montanans who are actually here on the call.
Oh, hello.
Woohoo! How are you engaging and coordinating with rural areas of Eastern Montana?
Great question. So we fund an organization called Montana Rural Voters on the C4 side, Northern Plains Resource Council on the C3 side, and they are doing a lot of work in rural parts of the state. Also, majority of our reservations are in rural Eastern Montana. And so doing that work through Western Native Voice is really important, but closing the gap in key precincts and districts in Eastern Montana is so incredibly important. One of the things that we are trying to experiment with is doing some targeted candidate recruitment in some of these really difficult districts. So we're going to use Aaron as our example, and we say, Aaron, we really need you to run for the 22nd legislative district, and you're not going to win, but what we need you to do is we need you to go out, talk to voters about these hyper local issues, and try to make sure that every Democrat feels like they can turn out and vote for somebody. And winning for you means moving the Democratic performance quotient, or kind of like what the percentage of Democrats we think in that district are, from 28 to 31. You're still not going to get to serve in the legislature. Sorry, but like, if you can find a few more votes in some of these key precincts in Eastern Montana, it will close the gap and it will add up to victories statewide for Tester Supreme Court statewide candidates. We've never really done that strategy before. It's usually like, hey, run and God bless, go forth, but then actually really trying to give them some resources, create a cohort so they don't feel like they're out on, a godforsaken mission, and be more clear about what it is that we're asking for them. So that's some of the different things that we're doing to address some of the rural issues. Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's been supporting this effort.
Yes,
we're doing a fundraiser this Thursday night, 7 p.m. So, we could keep supporting the effort. But in the meantime, we're going to shift gears and we're going to go to John Medallia and then Peter Hansen right after John. So John, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. And thanks, Stacie, for what is really a fabulous presentation. So I'm going to talk about the 31st Street Letter Team. We're part of a nationwide effort by grassroots groups to help save democracy, not only here, but also around the world. We're working with a group called Working America, the AFL-CIO arm that reaches out to non-union people. Many of its members are blue-collar, non-college, and that's an important demographic that really is hard for us to reach in other ways. So far, we've had a lot of successes. In 2023, we helped elect Janet Protasewicz to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, flipping the majority from reactionary to progressive. In Ohio, we helped to defeat a constitutional amendment designed to block another amendment on reproductive rights. In Virginia, we wrote letters for Democratic state legislative candidates, and now both houses are controlled by Democrats. And this year, we've already written letters that helped Tom Suozzi win his race in New York's 3rd Congressional District, flipping the seat formerly held by the Honorable George Santos. So now we're participating in a campaign with Working America to help mobilize Democrats in local elections in Wisconsin. And this is important really for several reasons. Wisconsin has been the tipping point state in several elections and could be this year. People who vote in elections in the spring will likely vote in the fall. And new legislative districts in Wisconsin, resulting in part from Justice Protasewicz's election, will give citizens the opportunity to overturn large GOP majorities in the state legislature gained through extreme gerrymandering. So these letter campaigns are highly rewarding. They focus on races that make a difference. They reach a key demographic. Working America conducts experiments to determine which messages are effective. Their sign-up system is simple, and Roberta McInerney and I are ready to help if you have questions. We'll be doing more letter campaigns this year, so if you'd like to join the letter team, please contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, John.
Yep, if I remember to unmute myself, I can start talking. There we go. I'm Peter Hansen. I'm one of the people, together with Julie Greenberg, who are leading the charge on Facebook. I suspect many, if not most of you, are on Facebook, and we connect with old friends. We look at pictures of the kids and the grandkids and all that, and that's great too. But we got to talking in the leadership team of what else can we do, especially at this time of year when it's a little early for door knocking and canvassing and a lot of the other activities that we'll be getting into later in the year. So what we would hope that most of you would do is join our Facebook group, which we just got up and running in the last month. We've got about 150 people who have already joined, and it would be wonderful to double that in the next month. Let me share my screen and I will show you how to do that. If you don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, you would create an account and you would end up on a home page that looks something like this. This is my home page. So how do I get here and then find 31st Street? Well, go to the search bar and type in 31st Street swing left, which I've already done. Hit a return, and it will now go show me the dozens and dozens of groups that have 31st Street in their name. But this one here at the top is the one that matches us, has our name, has a picture you may recognize. And at that point, you can, if I'm already a member, so it doesn't have a blue button on the right, it simply says go visit. I could click on the link and it will take me to our page. There would be a blue button here that says join. You hit that button and you're a member. Pretty simple. And then there's a couple of things you can do. First and foremost is it's a place for all of us to exchange information, ideas, support, links to articles that we've found interesting and you know, both good and bad. And then also help promote specific posts that we are putting onto this group page every Tuesday morning. And we're doing that and getting people to respond to them and then share them to their friend circles, so that the Facebook algorithm, which is a little bit of a black box that nobody understands perfectly, but the goal is to drive some of these fact-based posts to a wider audience. So, for example, if I scroll down here, here is a post that I put up this morning about something called Project 2025, which I suspect many of you are familiar with. If you hadn't heard it, it's run by the Heritage Foundation in DC and is fascinating, scary, and all kinds of things. But Tuesday mornings, we will put up a post. It'll generally be from the Courier newsroom. It'll have this little logo here with a yellow map of the US. And then we would hope you could go down below that and put in a reaction. And typically people they put the thumbs up for liking. Actually, what we would prefer is you respond with one of the stronger emotions. You love a post. Maybe you hate a post. It makes you angry. In this case, I'm going to say this information about Project 2025 makes me angry. I will add a comment. Just say unbelievable. And so I've added my comment, and then I would share this post. And typically I would just click on sharing to my feed, and then it'll start to show up on some of my friends' Facebook pages. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. That's basically it. So I'll leave it at that. I am happy to provide tech support to anybody. I've provided that to a number of folks already with questions on how do I do this and what are the ins and outs of doing something on Facebook. That is it. All right, Aaron, back to you.
I want to jump in because I'm just so blown away by Stacie. I gotta say, we're so grateful to have people like this that, you know, she obviously knows the state backward and forward, but they also have a really good game plan about how, you know, how to do well in November. So just maybe one more, we're going to stay on for some Q&A, but I can't resist just, you know, maybe giving her another round of applause or something.
Absolutely. I totally second that, Jim. That was fabulous.
And Stacie actually put her email in the chat and said that she would answer more questions if you want to email her, which is really generous because I'm imagine that you're very busy. So check the chat out if you want to get her direct email. So we are done with our formal program, but we're sticking around for a bit. And so we really thank you for being here. Thank you so much if you've already donated, and hope that you'll come to the event on Thursday evening. And feel free to log off now, but feel free also to ask anybody questions.